Facing your fears with Stoic courage. I lived like a Stoic for 30 days. And it broke my fear. Alright, look, we all have fears, right? That knot in your stomach before a big presentation. The cold sweat when you think about asking someone out. The paralyzing dread of failing. Losing someone you love, or honestly, just the fear of what tomorrow might bring. We feel it, you feel it, I feel it. For years, I let those fears dictate everything. I avoided opportunities. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I built walls around myself because the thought of getting hurt was just too much. It felt like I was walking through life with weights tied to my ankles. Constantly held back by invisible chains forged from my own anxieties. But what if I told you there's an ancient way of thinking? A philosophy practiced by emperors and slaves alike. That doesn't just help you manage fear, but helps you look it dead in the eye and smile? What if it's not about not being afraid, but about being brave despite the fear? I'm talking about stoicism, not the stiff upper lip, emotionless caricature you might think of. No, this is about fierce mental resilience. About understanding what you can control and what you can't, and finding incredible strength in that knowledge. A few months ago, I was facing a situation that honestly terrified me. It wasn't a life or death thing, not a lion in the path. It was vulnerability. Putting myself out there in a way I never had before. The fear of judgment, of rejection, of just completely bombing was immense. My initial instinct? Retreat, hide, pretend it wasn't happening. The old me would have done that in a heartbeat. But I'd been digging deep into this Stoic stuff, really trying to live it, and I thought, okay, this is it, this is the test. I remember standing there, heart hammering, palms sweating. Every single negative possibility flashed before my eyes. What if they laugh? What if I fail spectacularly? What if I regret this forever? It was overwhelming. This is where most people, including the old me, would turn tail. The fear screams. And we listen. We treat our fears like facts. Like prophecies of doom. We are afraid. Therefore, disaster is imminent. But that's the first lie fear tells us. Fear is just an emotion. A feeling fueled by a judgment we make about something outside our control. See, Stoicism slapped me across the face with a simple, brutal truth. You don't control what happens to you. You don't control what other people think. You don't control the outcome. You control your reaction. That's it. Everything else? It's out of your hands. Trying to control it is like trying to hold water in your fist. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away, leaving you frustrated and empty. So, standing there, paralyzed by the fear of judgment, I tried something different. Instead of focusing on the potential negative outcomes, which I couldn't control, I focused on what I could control. I could control my intention. I could control my effort. I could control my honesty. I could control taking that one first step, then the next. I remembered Epictetus talking about how it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. My fear wasn't coming from the situation itself, but from my judgment that failing or being judged would be catastrophic. Was it catastrophic? No. Did everything go perfectly? Absolutely not. There were awkward moments. There was feedback that stung a little. But because I had mentally prepared myself for the possibility of things not going perfectly. Because I had accepted that outcome was outside my control and wasn't inherently bad, it was just an outcome. The fear lost its grip. The emotional punch wasn't nearly as devastating as my mind had predicted. It was still a challenge, sure, but it was manageable. It was just what happened, and I got through it. I didn't just survive, I learned. I grew. I realized that the fear itself was a far greater prison than the potential negative outcome I was so desperately trying to avoid. This isn't some airy-fairy self-help guru telling you to just think positive. Stoicism is rugged, practical, almost brutally honest. It's about facing reality head-on, acknowledging the potential for suffering and loss, and still choosing to act virtuously and bravely. It's about understanding that your character, your inner state, is the only true good, and everything else, reputation, wealth, health, even life itself, is indifferent. It's neither good nor bad in itself, only in how we use it. Think about a time you were afraid to do something. Maybe it was speaking up in a meeting, Applying for a job you felt unqualified for, or ending a relationship that wasn't good for you. What was the fear? Was it the fear of the action itself? Or the fear of the consequences? The consequences are almost always outside your control, aren't they? You can prepare for the meeting, nail the presentation, but you can't control if your boss likes it. You can write the perfect application, but you can't control who gets hired. You can end the relationship kindly, but you can't control how the other person reacts. The Stoics teach us to place our goals not on the outcome. I want to get this job, but on our own action and intention. I want to apply for this job with diligence and honesty. The goal isn't to not be afraid, but to act in accordance with your values despite the fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the face of it. Justice isn't easy, it often requires confronting difficult truths and people. Wisdom isn't innate, it requires constantly learning and challenging your own judgments. Temperance isn't about denying pleasure, it's about having control over your desires so they don't control you. Especially when fear drives you towards unhealthy comforts or avoidance. Let's take another scenario, the fear of public speaking. It's incredibly common. Your heart races, your voice shakes, your mind goes blank. What are you afraid of? Usually, it's the fear of embarrassment, of looking foolish, of being judged negatively. All outcomes you cannot fully control. A Stoic approach wouldn't tell you to magically not be afraid. It would tell you to prepare diligently, something you can control. It would tell you to focus on the purpose of your speech, sharing information, persuading, inspiring, rather than the audience's reaction, which you can't control. It would remind you that even if you stumble, forget your lines, or someone in the back rolls their eyes, your worth as a person is not diminished. Your character remains intact. You acted bravely by getting up there at all. That action, performing your duty or pursuing a worthy goal despite internal resistance, is the only true success in the Stoic sense. This is tough. It requires a radical shift in perspective. We are so conditioned to value external things, approval, success as defined by society, comfort. Stoicism asks us to value only our inner state, our virtue. It's like flipping your entire value system upside down. And when you start doing that, when you truly believe that the worst external thing that can happen cannot touch your inner core, fear starts to lose its power. Imagine you're terrified of confrontation. You avoid difficult conversations at all costs. Your fear is probably rooted in the potential fallout, anger, shouting, damaging the relationship, or simply the discomfort of tension. These are all external outcomes. A Stoic would say, what is the right thing to do? Is it just to speak your truth? Is it courageous to address the issue? If your intention is right, if you are acting with honesty and aiming for a just resolution, as much as possible, then the act of having the conversation is the virtuous thing. The outcome, the other person's reaction, is not your problem in the Stoic sense. It's their problem, their reaction, their judgment. You did what was right, and that is the only thing within your control that truly matters. This doesn't mean you're reckless or insensitive. Stoicism values wisdom, which includes prudence and careful consideration. You prepare, you think about the best way to approach the conversation, but you don't get paralyzed by the fear of the potential negative response. You do your best with what you can control, and you accept whatever comes. This is liberating. It's like shedding a heavy cloak you didn't even realize you were wearing. Think about the fear of failure. We are drilled from a young age to succeed, to win. Failure is painted as the ultimate negative outcome. But what is failure in the Stoic view? Is it not achieving an external goal? Yes, it is. Is that inherently bad? No, it is indifferent. What matters is how you tried. Did you put in the effort? Did you act with diligence and perseverance? Did you learn from the experience? If you did, then in the only sense that truly counts, the development of your character, you did not fail. You lived according to your values. The external result is just information. Maybe you need to change your approach. Maybe the goal wasn't right for you. Maybe external circumstances intervened. But the fear of failure, the paralysis it causes, that is the true failure. Because it prevents you from acting, from trying, from living. I remember working on a project I cared deeply about. I poured everything into it. And it didn't work out. Spectacularly didn't work out. The immediate reaction was crushing disappointment, followed swiftly by that cold, creeping fear of judgment and the feeling of being a failure. My mind started spinning with, "What will people think?" and "This proves I'm not good enough." For a moment, I felt that familiar urge to retreat, to hide my face, to never try anything ambitious again. But then, that Stoic training kicked in. I paused. I asked myself, what did I control in that situation? I controlled my effort, my dedication, my willingness to learn, my integrity throughout the process. Did I act virtuously? Yes, I believe I did. I gave it my all. I was honest. I collaborated fairly. The outcome was outside my control. It was affected by market conditions, team dynamics, unforeseen problems, a million things I couldn't dictate. Was the failure of the project inherently bad? No, it was a negative outcome for the project. But it wasn't a failure of my character. In fact, reflecting on how I handled the setback, acknowledging the outcome without collapsing into despair, analyzing what went wrong objectively, and resolving to learn, felt like a deeper success than if the project had sailed smoothly without challenge. The fear tried to tell me the story was, "You failed. You are a failure." Stoicism helped me rewrite that story too. The project didn't succeed. But I acted with courage and diligence, and I learned valuable lessons. That shift in perspective is monumental. This kind of mental training is like building a muscle. You don't eliminate fear instantly. It's a constant practice. Every time you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that whisper of doubt in your ear, it's an opportunity to pause, an opportunity to ask, what am I truly afraid of? Is it something within my control or outside of it? How can I act with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance in this moment, regardless of the outcome? One of the most powerful Stoic tools for facing fear is something called premeditation of adversity, or premeditatio malorum. It sounds morbid, I know, but hear me out. It's not about dwelling on the negative. It's about calmly, rationally considering the worst-case scenario before it happens. What if you lose your job? What if you get sick? What if a relationship ends? What if your biggest fear actually comes true? Most people avoid thinking about these things because they're scary. But by avoiding them, we give them immense power in our imaginations. They become these vague, terrifying monsters in the dark. Premeditation brings them into the light. You think through, step by step, what would actually happen? If I lost my job, what would I do? What resources do I have? What skills could I use? If I got sick, what support systems are available? By calmly considering the potential difficulties, you realize a few things. First, the worst-case scenario is often survivable, or at least manageable, even if difficult. Second, you can identify things you can do now to mitigate the impact, save money, build relationships, take care of your health. Third, and most importantly, when something bad does happen, it's not a complete shock. You've already mentally rehearsed it. It still hurts, yes, but you're not blindsided by the fear of the unknown. You're facing a difficulty you've already considered, and you can focus your energy on dealing with it rather than panicking about it. This isn't about being pessimistic. It's about being prepared. It's about building mental anti-fragility. Just like exposing your body to stress, like exercise, makes it stronger. Exposing your mind to the thought of potential difficulties makes it more resilient. It inoculates you against the paralyzing power of fear when those difficulties actually arise. I started doing this exercise regularly. What am I afraid of right now? Okay, let's take the fear of rejection. What's the absolute worst that can happen if I put myself out there and get rejected? I feel embarrassed. The other person might think negatively of me. Life continues. Is that truly catastrophic? Will I die? Will the world end? No. It will hurt, maybe for a little while. But it is a temporary external event. It doesn't define me. By calmly walking through that potential pain, I reduced its power. It wasn't a vague, soul-crushing horror anymore. It was a specific, manageable discomfort. This practice isn't just about preparing for big disasters. It's useful for everyday fears too. Afraid of a difficult conversation? Premeditate. What's the worst they can say or do? How would I respond? Afraid of trying a new skill and being bad at it? Premeditate. What's the worst that happens? I look foolish for a bit? I don't learn it quickly? Is that truly the end of the world? No, it's just part of the learning process. By practicing this, you train your mind to see that most of what you fear is either outside your control or, if it happens, isn't truly detrimental to the one thing that matters: your character and your ability to act virtuously. Fear thrives in the dark corners of our imagination, whispering terrifying possibilities. Stoicism turns on the light, revealing that the monsters are often much smaller than they appeared, and that even the real difficulties can be faced with inner strength. This brings us to a point that is absolutely crucial, maybe the most counterintuitive part of facing fear with Stoicism. It's not about suppressing your emotions. The Stoics weren't robots. They felt fear, sadness, anger. They were human, but they understood that these emotions arise from our judgments. If you judge losing your job as the worst thing that could possibly happen, you will feel immense fear and despair. If you judge it as an indifferent event that presents challenges but also opportunities, your emotional response will be different. The goal isn't to not feel fear, but to recognize the judgment that is causing the intense, debilitating emotion, and to challenge that judgment. Is this situation truly harmful to my character? Is it preventing me from being a good person? From acting with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance? Usually, the answer is no. External events cannot force you to be unjust or cowardly. They can create difficult circumstances, but your response, your inner state, is still yours to command. So, when fear arises, instead of trying to push it away or distract yourself, pause, feel it, acknowledge the physical sensations, then, gently, but firmly, ask yourself, what judgment am I making right now that is causing this fear? Am I judging an external outcome as catastrophic? Am I forgetting what is truly within my control? This moment of mindful self-assessment, inspired by Stoic principles, is where the real power lies. It's where you begin to untangle the wires of fear and take back control of your inner world. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you truly own, the only thing that cannot be taken from you by external circumstances, is your character, your inner freedom, your ability to choose your response. Fear tries to steal that. Fear tells you you are a victim of circumstance, powerless against the potential negative outcomes. Stoicism tells you you are an agent, capable of choosing virtue and resilience, no matter what happens. This is just the beginning. We've only scratched the surface of how this ancient wisdom can radically transform your relationship with fear. We've talked about the dichotomy of control, premeditation, and challenging judgments, but what about the fear of judgment itself? The fear of failure? The fear of loss? And what about the ultimate fear? You think this is powerful? You haven't seen anything yet. What if the very thing you're most afraid of is the key to your greatest strength? Why your deepest fear might actually be your greatest opportunity. Alright, you made it to segment 2. The journey into facing your fears with Stoic courage is just getting started. In the first part, we began to chip away at the foundation of fear by understanding the dichotomy of control, focusing only on what's truly up to us, and by calmly considering the worst-case scenarios with premeditatio malorum. We started to see that fear often stems from our judgments about external events, not the events themselves. But let's be real, knowing these things intellectually is one thing. Facing down that cold, paralyzing terror when it hits you like a freight train is another. And some fears feel so deeply ingrained, so personal, they seem impossible to touch with mere philosophy. I'm talking about the fear of judgment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of losing everything you hold dear. These aren't just abstract concepts, they claw at our very sense of self. Consider the fear of judgment. It holds so many of us hostage. We don't speak our minds. We don't pursue our passions. We don't express our true selves because we're terrified of what other people will think. Will they criticize? Will they laugh? Will they reject us? This fear is insidious because it places our worth, our very identity, in the hands of others. And guess what? You have absolutely zero control over what other people think. Zero. Zip. Nada. So, if you can't control their judgment, and your fear is based on their judgment, how do you break free? This is where the Stoic understanding of value becomes revolutionary. Remember, the Stoics teach that the only true good is virtue. Your inner character, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, everything else, reputation, social status, what others think of you, is indifferent. It has no inherent moral value. It cannot make you a good person or a bad person. When you truly internalize this, the fear of judgment starts to crumble. Why? Because you realize that someone else's opinion, positive or negative, cannot affect your true worth. If someone judges you harshly, that is a reflection of their mind, their judgments, their potential biases or ignorance. It says nothing about your character, your intentions, your effort. I used to be terrified of criticism. I would agonize over negative comments, replaying them in my head, letting them fuel that fear of not being good enough. Then I started applying this Stoic idea. Someone says something negative about my work, my appearance, my choices? Okay, is their criticism based on facts? Can I learn from it? If yes, I take the lesson and discard the emotional sting. If no, if it's just a mean or uninformed opinion, then it's just noise. It's an external event, completely outside my control. It cannot diminish my character, my dedication, my values. Why should I let it disturb my inner peace? This is incredibly freeing. It doesn't mean you become arrogant or dismissive. Wisdom requires considering feedback, but you evaluate it based on reason and whether it helps you live more virtuously. Not based on the fear of being disliked or disapproved of. You untether your self-worth from the volatile, unpredictable sea of public opinion and anchor it firmly in the bedrock of your own character and actions. Think of a time you held back because of fear of judgment. Maybe you didn't share an idea, pursue a passion, or stand up for something you believed in. The fear felt overwhelming, right? Now, through a Stoic lens, ask, by holding back, was I acting with courage? Was I acting with honesty? Was I pursuing wisdom by silencing my own thoughts? Probably not. You were sacrificing your inner virtue, your courage, your integrity, out of fear of an external, indifferent thing, other people's opinions. The Stoics would say, you paid the highest price, sacrificing your virtue, to avoid losing something of little true value, external approval. That's a bad trade. The Stoic call to action here is, do the right thing. Live according to your values. Regardless of what others think, focus on your intention and effort, which are within your control, not the outcome of their judgment, which is not. Now, let's talk about the fear of failure, which often goes hand in hand with the fear of judgment. We touched on this, but let's go deeper. Society tells us failure is bad. Our report cards, our job performance reviews, the highlight reels on social media, they all reinforce the idea that success is good and failure is bad. But Stoicism asks, why is failure bad? Does failing at a task make you an inherently bad person? Does it strip you of your capacity for reason, justice, courage, or temperance? No. Failure is an external outcome. You tried something, and it didn't work the way you intended. That's it. It's data. It's an opportunity to learn. The fear of failure, however, is bad, because it paralyzes you. It prevents you from trying, from learning, from growing. The fear of failure is a judgment. The judgment that not achieving a desired outcome is catastrophic and reflects negatively on your core being. This is where Stoic resilience comes in. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, said something like, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Our fear of failure makes things harder because it stops us from even starting. By accepting that failure is a possible, even probable, outcome in any endeavor, and that this outcome does not define our worth, we free ourselves to act. I remember taking on a completely new skill that I was terrible at initially. Every mistake felt like a confirmation of my inadequacy. The fear of looking stupid, of never improving, was strong, but I kept reminding myself, my worth isn't tied to mastering this skill instantly. My worth is in the effort I'm putting in, the willingness to be a beginner, the perseverance despite setbacks. The external outcome, my current level of skill, was indifferent. My inner effort and resilience were what mattered. And guess what? Slowly, I got better, not because I magically stopped fearing failure, but because I acted despite the fear, focusing on the process, effort, learning, practice, rather than the outcome, being skilled. Failure became less terrifying and more just part of the process. A necessary stepping stone. This perspective is incredibly powerful in a world that worships external success. It allows you to pursue challenging goals, knowing that the true success is in the virtuous effort itself, regardless of whether you achieve the specific external result you aimed for. It transforms failure from a terrifying endpoint into a valuable data point on the path of growth. But what about the truly devastating fears? The fear of losing someone you love, the fear of illness, the fear of death itself. These feel different, don't they? They touch on our deepest attachments and our fundamental vulnerability. Stoicism doesn't offer a magic wand to make the pain of loss disappear. The Stoics experienced grief, sorrow, and fear, but they had a framework for understanding these experiences that prevented them from being utterly destroyed by them. The fear of loss, whether of a person, health, or possessions, often stems from our attachment to these things. We identify with them, build our happiness around them, and thus, the thought of losing them is terrifying because it feels like losing a part of ourselves, or losing our source of happiness. Stoicism teaches us to value things according to nature. People are mortal, health is fragile, possessions are temporary, everything external is on loan from fortune. As Seneca put it, we enjoy it while we have it, but we must be prepared to return it without complaint. This is not detachment in a cold, uncaring sense. It's about appreciating what you have without making your inner peace dependent on its continued existence. When you love someone, you love their character, their presence, the shared experiences. You don't love them because you possess them or because they are a guarantee of your future happiness. You love them for who they are. And while the pain of separation or loss is real and unavoidable, the Stoic approach helps temper the fear of that loss before it happens, and the debilitating despair after it happens. By regularly contemplating the impermanence of all things, a practice related to memento mori, remembering you will die, you paradoxically deepen your appreciation for the present moment and the people in your life. You realize that every moment is precious because it is finite. This doesn't create anxiety, it creates a sense of urgency to live fully and virtuously now. When loss occurs, the pain is natural. Stoicism doesn't tell you not to grieve. It tells you that while the external event, the loss, is outside your control and is indeed difficult, your response to that loss is within your control. Do you collapse into despair, bitterness, or self-pity? Or do you choose to honor the memory of what was lost by living virtuously, by continuing to fulfill your duties, by finding strength in the face of adversity? The Stoic path is the latter. It is about recognizing the reality of loss but refusing to let it destroy your capacity for reason, virtue, and fulfilling your role in the world. I remember a period of intense personal loss. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The initial fear was overwhelming, fear of being alone, fear of the future, fear of the pain. The grief was immense. For a while, I struggled, but I kept coming back to these Stoic ideas. This loss is an external event. It is painful, yes, but it cannot take away my capacity to think, to act, to choose. The judgment that this loss made my life worthless or that I couldn't go on was what was truly debilitating. By focusing on what I could control, my daily routines, my commitment to my responsibilities, my effort to process the emotions constructively, and my determination to find meaning again, I slowly started to navigate the storm. The pain didn't vanish, but the paralyzing fear did. I realized that my strength wasn't dependent on having everything I wanted, it was inherent. An inner resource I could tap into even in the darkest times. This is the incredible power of focusing on your inner citadel, your character, your virtue. External events, no matter how terrifying or painful, cannot breach that inner fortress unless you give them permission by making irrational judgments about them. Fear is often the gatekeeper, whispering lies and trying to convince you that external threats are more powerful than your inner resilience. So, we've journeyed through the fears of judgment, failure, and loss, seeing how Stoicism offers a radically different, empowering perspective. We've seen that by shifting our focus from uncontrollable outcomes to controllable actions and intentions, and by valuing our character above all else, fear loses its crippling grip. We've learned that premeditating adversity prepares us, And understanding impermanence helps us appreciate the present and face loss with resilience. But there's one fear that looms largest for many. It's the fear that makes all other fears feel insignificant. The one we often push deep down and avoid thinking about at all costs. What happens when you finally face the ultimate fear and discover it sets you free? The ultimate Stoic fear hack that changes everything. Alright, welcome to the final segment. If you've stayed with me this far, you're serious about facing your fears head-on, armed with the wisdom of the Stoics. We've talked about the power of focusing on what you control, of preparing your mind for adversity, and of redefining success and failure in terms of your inner character rather than external outcomes. We've looked at how Stoicism helps us navigate the fears of judgment and loss by detaching our sense of worth from things outside our control. Now, we arrive at the summit of fear, the one that underlies many others, the one we instinctively recoil from, the fear of death. Memento mori, remember that you will die. It sounds bleak, doesn't it? Why would anyone want to dwell on that? Because, paradoxically, facing the reality of death, calmly and rationally, is one of the most powerful tools for living a fearless and meaningful life. Our fear of death isn't just the fear of non-existence. It's often tied to fears of pain, of the unknown, of leaving loved ones behind, of not accomplishing everything we wanted, of our projects being unfinished. It's the ultimate loss, the final surrender of control. Stoicism confronts this head-on. Epicurus, whose philosophy had some overlap with Stoicism on this point, though they differed on others, famously said, "Death is nothing to us. For as long as we exist, death is not with us, but when death comes, then we do not exist." Seneca echoed this in a Stoic context. Why should I fear death? If, when it is present, I shall not be? The Stoics argued that the suffering associated with death is in the anticipation, not in the event itself. The act of dying might involve pain, which can be endured with courage. But death itself, the state of non-being, cannot be experienced, and therefore cannot be bad for us when it is occurring. This might sound cold, but it's profoundly practical. It shifts the fear from the uncontrollable future event to your controllable present state of mind. Are you afraid of dying or afraid of thinking about death? Are you afraid of the event or your judgment of the event? By contemplating our mortality, we gain immense perspective. All those little fears, the fear of public speaking, the fear of asking someone out, the fear of trying something new, they seem trivial when viewed from the perspective of your finite time here. If you are going to die, eventually, anyway, why waste your precious, limited time being paralyzed by fears of things that cannot truly harm your character? Remembering that life is fragile and temporary isn't a morbid exercise in Stoicism. It's an invigorating call to action. It's a reminder that every day is a gift, an opportunity to live according to your values. If you only have a limited time, how do you want to spend it? Do you want to spend it cowering before your fears, seeking external validation, or chasing fleeting pleasures? Or do you want to spend it wisely, justly, courageously, and temperately, pursuing things that are truly good, the cultivation of your own character and service to others? I started incorporating regular contemplation of death into my routine, not in a morbid, dwelling way, but as a reminder of perspective, when I felt bogged down by trivial worries or paralyzed by fear of minor setbacks. I'd ask myself, viewed from my deathbed, will this matter? Will I regret not acting because of this fear? Almost always, the answer was a resounding no. The regret would be in the inaction, the capitulation to fear, not in the potential negative outcome. This practice is a powerful antidote to procrastination, to chasing things that don't truly matter, and to letting fear dictate your choices. It clarifies what is truly important: your relationships, your character, your contribution to the world. These are the things that have lasting value. Your reputation after death, your unfinished projects, the money in your bank account, these are left behind. Facing the fear of death, then, is not about becoming indifferent to life. It's about becoming intensely aware of its value and your responsibility to live it well. Now, it's about understanding that the only thing you truly have is the present moment, and your ability to use that moment wisely. This ultimate fear hack, the acceptance of mortality, reshapes all other fears. The fear of losing someone you love is tempered by the understanding that all relationships are finite, and the value is in the time shared and the virtue cultivated within them. The fear of failure is lessened by the knowledge that external achievements are temporary. Your character's development is eternal. The fear of judgment fades when you realize that in the face of death, external opinions are utterly insignificant compared to the judgment of your own conscience. Did you live well? This understanding culminates in a powerful Stoic principle, amor fati, love of fate. It means not just accepting everything that happens, including the difficult and the terrifying, but loving it, seeing it as necessary, as part of the grand cosmic order, as an opportunity for you to practice virtue. Love of fate doesn't mean you don't try to change things for the better. You absolutely should, acting with wisdom and justice. But when adversity strikes, when fear threatens to overwhelm you, amor fati is the ultimate shield. It's the acceptance that this is what is happening now, and it is an opportunity for me to demonstrate courage, resilience, and wisdom. If someone betrays you, if you lose everything, if you face illness, the Stoic response, embracing amor fati, is to say, this is challenging. This is an opportunity for me to practice patience, courage, and perseverance. You don't like it, you don't wish it happened, but you accept it as the raw material fate has given you to work with, and you strive to create something virtuous from it. Applying amor fati to fear means not just accepting that you feel afraid, but accepting the situation that is causing the fear as an integral part of your path. The challenging conversation? That's your opportunity to practice honesty and courage. The potential failure? That's your chance to practice perseverance and humility. The prospect of loss? That's your reminder to cherish the present and practice acceptance. This is not easy. It takes constant effort, constant practice. There will be days when fear feels overwhelming, when the ancient wisdom seems distant. But that's okay. Stoicism isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about trying, stumbling, getting back up, and trying again. Let me tell you about a moment when all these pieces clicked for me in a profound way. It was during a situation where I had to make a very difficult decision that had potential negative consequences, both professionally and personally. The fear was immense: fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of hurting others. Every fiber of my being screamed to take the easy way out, to avoid the confrontation, to preserve the status quo even though it felt wrong. I paused. I felt the fear. I used the dichotomy of control. I couldn't control the outcome, the reactions of others, or whether things would go smoothly. I could control my intention, my honesty, my courage in facing the situation, and my commitment to doing what I believed was right. I used premeditatio malorum. What was the worst-case scenario? I walked through it. Okay, if that happens, what then? How would I cope? What resources do I have? It was difficult to contemplate, but doing so made it less terrifying. I remembered the Stoic view of value. My character was the only true good. External consequences, while unpleasant, could not diminish me unless I acted unjustly or cowardly. The true failure would be to surrender to fear and compromise my values. And finally, I touched on amor fati. This difficult situation was presenting itself to me. It was my challenge, my opportunity. Could I face it with courage and integrity? Could I find strength within myself that I didn't know I had? With all of this in mind, I made the decision. It wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations. There were negative reactions. Some of the outcomes I had premeditated did indeed happen. It was painful, but the crippling fear that I had anticipated never fully materialized. Why? Because I had already faced the possibilities in my mind. Because my focus was firmly on acting according to my values, which was within my control. Because I understood that the external difficulties, while real, could not touch my inner core. I emerged from that experience changed, not unscathed, but stronger. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but its power over me was broken. I realized that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act virtuously despite the fear. This is the journey of facing your fears with Stoic courage. It's not about becoming fearless, it's about becoming resilient. It's about understanding what is truly important, focusing your energy on what you can control, preparing your mind for adversity, and accepting everything else as an opportunity to practice virtue. It's about realizing that the greatest prison is the one built by our own fears. And the key to freedom is within us, in our capacity for reason, courage, justice, and temperance. So, what fear are you facing right now? Big or small? What is it telling you? Is it based on a judgment about something outside your control? Can you pause, acknowledge the feeling, and then shift your focus to how you can act virtuously in this moment? Regardless of the outcome, can you contemplate the worst-case scenario and see that you have the inner resources to face it? Can you look at this challenge, this fear, and see it not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to build your inner strength? The path isn't easy, but it is incredibly rewarding. It leads to a life of greater peace, resilience, and freedom. A life where fear is no longer the master, but a signal, an opportunity to practice the very virtues that make life worth living. You have the power within you. The Stoics knew it. Now, it's time for you to discover it. Face your fear, not to eliminate it, but to act in spite of it. And in that action, you will find your courage, your strength, your freedom,